it and they win, then they
Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and fondle slap of choice, I don't know when that was. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information. Because seriously, they don't want you to just raise two sources whenever I try to prove out. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappointed on another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2, within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And we are live. That is that. This is the Ochelli Effect right here live on UCY.TV radio. It is Saturday night. It is also December 13th, 2014. So, 12, 13, 14. And of course, the first rule about the Ochelli Effect is you don't talk about the Ochelli Effect. The second rule about the Ochelli Effect is you don't talk about the Ochelli Effect. I'm learning that today. Anyway, do appreciate those of you who decided to tune in. I'm definitely going to do something worth burning up some people's ears tonight, because we're going to discuss the topic of torture with somebody who actually dealt with it firsthand, somebody who was actually involved in the occupation of Iraq. That would be Frank Gregory Ford, who has been on my show before. Of course, a little technical issue, so he's going to have to call in just a moment. Had him on the line, but this new Skype is not allowing me to add things the way I want to, so Mr. Ford will be on with me shortly. However, he has particularly interesting insights, and I'm sure you guys are going to wonder where I lost my mind here, but here's the thing. When it comes to the discussions that have been in the media lately, the Feinstein report about the CIA torture programs and all of that kind of good stuff out there, which, first of all, just from my own opinion, before I even get Mr. Ford on, these denials of knowledge regarding, exactly what was going on, the reality behind the fact that that they had no clue of what was happening. This is absolute nonsense. I urge anybody out there not to buy that. Let's understand that this is unreliable and impractical. So much as post 9/11 sentiment might have been all about wanting to get some sort of vengeance. Post 9/11 sentiment in this country among the agencies in the military, every which way you looked, everybody waving their Chinese slave-manufactured actual American flag-like symbols around this country and everything else. There was a deep sentiment, a deep anti-Middle Eastern and Muslim sentiment throughout this country, and of course it made it a whole lot more acceptable to put up with things like this. And of course we've dealt with the Abu Ghraib situation, which of course Mr. Ford was also involved in, as someone who understood what the usefulness of interrogation was, as someone who was schooled in these things because he was a military intelligence operative. We're going to hear a different perspective tonight. We're not going to hear from these talking head people that want to come out and defend the agency. We're not going to hear from these people that say, well, those terrible Democrats are trying to make their points, and those awful Republicans are trying to defend people like Bush. And, I don't play that game, Reminds me of the old In Living Color sketch, except instead of homie, don't play that, Chucky, don't play that. I'm not foolish enough to buy this garbage. I'm not foolish enough to buy the idea that this was a sensible and reasonable response to what was happening. Okay? And Mr. Ford, you are on the air, sir. I was just talking about the general situation. Sorry I had to bring you in this way. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Excellent.
5 and 5, as they say.
Excellent.
Okay, yeah. Well, where are we in all this hyper drama going on now, coming out of Washington?
Precisely. In the hyperdrama coming out of Washington, which was exactly what I was talking about, throwing things back and forth about, well, we didn't know what the agency was doing, and the military field manual is what we adopted after we found out about it, but, the Feinsteins of the world and these other individuals who were coming out to make these statements, well, we weren't aware of it. And also the former director of the CIA, Hayden, coming out and stating that, well, it was a medically necessary procedure to do something like rectal rehydration. I cringe even saying that phrase, Mr. Ford. It is. I mean, how much more disturbing do you have to get exactly regarding this kind of stuff? But let's put that aside. Because you have a very precise area of experience regarding this stuff. Okay, we've all heard about Abu Ghraibs in one way or another. It's been one of those things that was definitely part of this discussion long before this not entirely, but partially redacted, report summary came out, which is meant to represent these 6,000 pages that they supposedly have, which I'm sure would be about, 5,000 pages of blacked out stuff and maybe 1,000 pages of nonsensical muttering if we ever get our hands on it. But the bantering and the debates about releasing these reports and discussing whether this is going to endanger American lives, whether this is going to endanger American personnel, and I'm not somebody who's been involved in this kind of stuff. So maybe I don't understand it too well, but in my mind, it seems like the thing that would endanger American personnel, the thing that would endanger the homeland, okay, the thing that would endanger our men and women in uniform that don't have anything to do with this kind of stuff, is the fact that these things are being done in the first place. It's not the report that's coming out. The rest of the world is well aware of a whole lot of this stuff. Although I dare say that the phrase, again, rectal rehydration is new to many. Wow. So let's begin at the beginning with you and what it is that you have knowledge of, because we're hearing a lot of names, sort of bandied about that you're very familiar with. Let's start with Feinstein there. Let's just begin there. But you know what? Hold on. Actually, let's take it from the top where you come into the story. Just sort of a brief summary about how it is you would have such knowledge for the people that didn't hear the last show that I did with you. Let's give them an idea.
Okay, all right. By the way, rectal rehydration. Okay, the American people should be really familiar with that concept now because for the last 10 years, that is exactly what the American people have been getting, is rectally rehydrated. All right, by force, by our administration, by both presidencies, Bush and Obama. All right, there's when I heard that term rectal rehydration, okay. I was trained and educated as a physician, and I worked in the intelligence business for close to 3 decades. Okay, now I have never heard something like that applied in an intelligence interrogation environment. All right, but all I can say is that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Abu Sager, and Abdullah Talabani, who were my assets, when I was in Samarra, Iraq, all right, And Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, everybody knows, all right, everybody knows, okay, as the head of ISIS now, all right, he if he suffered that kind of treatment, okay, rectal rehydration, all right, no wonder he's trying to cut heads off, of Americans, all right. If he was forced to have that kind of degradation, no wonder he is thinking, and the 5,000 case hardened terrorist warriors that he has now, fanatical warriors that were sitting in Abu Ghraib prison suffering that degradation. No wonder, if somebody forcefully rehydrated me, okay, rectally, I'll tell you what, when I got up and got loose, the first thing I'd do is I'd grab a knife and go after the person who had forcefully rectally rehydrated me, okay? So no wonder these people are behaving the way they are. So, you bet. Now, this, as you might imagine, Chuck, and for your listeners, this last few days has been extremely interesting for me. All right, it's deja vu times the power of 10 for me. All right, Senator Feinstein, Dianne Feinstein, she's of course from California here, and the Ninth Circuit. Now that strange thing, the irony is that the command, the intelligence command that was doing all this bad stuff in Abu Ghraib prison, okay, they're in the same building, in the same room with the CIA, okay, is the 223rd in Dianne Feinstein's district, okay. The irony is just too hard to believe here, all right. And where I have my lawsuit now concerning exactly what the American people have been hearing about, I was renditioned. I was, for reporting torture to my command, all right, because I had to take care of the victims of our torture. I was the medical person, all right. I had to take care of the victims that we created. I was in a horrendously bad spot to be in, as in I was running my own intelligence network, and I had to take care of the victims of our interrogation services, all right. Now, you can imagine, what kind of bad spot that placed me in. Rock and a hard spot, I think, is what they say. All right.
Well, right now, let's just back up for a second, because of course, in the past couple of days, the London Guardian released a story which is headlined "I.S.I.S. The Inside Story." Okay.
Right.
And I went over some of this, and I happen to know that you are familiar with a great many of the names, places, and things that are going to come up in this article. So if you don't mind, I want to go through a little bit of that. And because you did mention Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, which is a name which has become exactly synonymous with the leadership of ISIS at this point in time. And this was one of the guys that you had actually been involved with. As you said, he was one of the assets that was presented to you at one point on my other show with you regarding, gathering intelligence in that area among the supposed insurgent population. Now, again, like you said, look, a lot of these things come back as boomerangs. It's the way it runs. But let's just take a look at this. And this is by Martin Chulov. Chulov, and was actually published on the 11th, looks like. So, in the summer of 2004, a young jihadist in shackles and chains was walked by his captors slowly into the Camp Bucca prison in southern Iraq. He was nervous as two American soldiers led him through 3 brightly lit buildings and then a maze of wire corridors into an open yard, where men with middle-distance stares wearing brightly colored prison uniforms stood back warily watching him. Okay. In quotes, "I knew some of them straight away," he told me last month. In quotes again, "I feared Bucca all the way down on the plane. But when I got there, it was much better than I thought in every way." End quote. The jihadist who uses the nom de guerre Abu Ahmed, which is not his right name in case you don't understand what that phrase meant, entered Camp Bucca as a young man a decade ago and is now a senior official within Islamic State, which all of us know as ISIS, ISIL, etc., have risen through its ranks with many of the men who served time alongside him in prison. Like him, the other detainees had been snatched by U.S. soldiers from Iraq's towns and cities and flown to a place that had already become infamous, a foreboding desert fortress that would shape the legacy of the U.S. presence in Iraq. The other prisoners did not take long to warn him. Abu Ahmed, which again is not his real name, recalled. They had also been terrified of Bucca. I think I'm saying that right, but quickly realized that far from their worst fears, the U.S.-run prison provided an extraordinary opportunity. We could never have all gotten together like this in Baghdad or anywhere else, and that was in quotes, he told me. It would have been impossibly dangerous here. We were not only safe, but we were only a few hundred meters away from the entire al-Qaeda leadership. It was at Camp Bucca that Abu Ahmed first met Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the emir of ISIS, who is now frequently described as the world's most dangerous terrorist leader. From the beginning, Abu Ahmed said others in the camp seemed to defer to him. Even then, he was Abu Bakr, but none of us knew he would ever end up as leader. Now I'm going to stop there. And you know this camp, don't you? You know exactly what we're talking about here.
Well, okay, all right. I met Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, okay, early on, all right. Yeah, and he was young, and he didn't have, that impressive beard that he has now. He was he was another Saddam Hussein lookalike, with clean-shaven with a mustache. But I had just arrived in Samarra, the city of Samarra, by about 3 days, and he was brought in to us, okay, under interesting circumstances, okay. We did not know, I did not know, that he was actually second in command, and this is important for your listeners, second in command of Mukhabarat, all right? That means nothing to anybody, but I will explain that. Mukhabarat. Now, all the government types that are listening know immediately what this means, okay? Mukhabarat was the ferocious, highly effective intelligence service that Saddam Hussein had set up, mainly to keep himself in power, but to deal with the other intelligence services of, for instance, Syria. There is a Syrian Mukhabarat. And Mukhabarat handles all the issues that are required to keep somebody like Saddam Hussein in power. The Soviets sent in their intelligence specialists to form Mukhabarat. The GRU and the KGB all came in, and they actually had a village a Russian village on the Air Force base of Balad, okay, to send in consultants to set up these intelligence networks operating in the Middle East. And everybody says, well, who cares about that? Well, guess who almost defeated the U.S. in Iraq? We were within weeks of being on our ear in Iraq, and it was because of the intelligence networks being run by Mukhabarat. So anyway, I looked at him, he looked at me, and he said, guess what? Yeah, he said this in Arabic, of course. He said, we have somebody named Jessica something or other, okay, a young female soldier. We have her in our control, and we are going to do. We are doing terrible things to her. And I said, okay. I looked right back at him, and he looked literally like a coiled viper when he was looking at me saying this. And I looked right back at him, and I said, okay, now everything, we have you in our control. We have everything that happens to her is going to happen to you. Is that clear? If you don't tell us where she is right now, this is going to happen to you. Exactly what happens to her. And he started talking immediately, all right? And he told us, where she was. It still took, because of the way the system was set up, 3 to 4 days to locate her and finally, and she had some help with a doctor that flagged down some MPs and so forth. But we found out where she was, okay, as a result of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. So I didn't realize, though, okay, about the importance of who he was. And nobody is realizing the importance to this day of who he is, all right? The intelligence database systems that are operating in Iraq and Syria, all right, are mukhabarat. They know all there is to know, and they collect every day, all day long, on everybody that's important in the Middle East. And that's why when you see ISIS roll into a town, and they have their little checklists, and they walk up to a certain door, they bang on the door, and they grab whoever it is, they check his name off the list, and they go blow his brains out on CNN. They don't do this arbitrarily. They know exactly who these people are and who they're going to kill, all right? They know exactly who the oil engineers are in the fields of Ramadi, all right, and who not to kill. You haven't seen a single oil engineer killed since ISIS has taken over. Of course not, all right? That is a major form of revenue for ISIS, $1 million a day, okay? And so 3 months later, one of my leading sources came to me and said, "Look, I have 3 people I want you to recruit," and one of them was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The other was Abdullah Talabani, who went on to become the first president of Kurdistan. And the other, and it's important, and I want your listeners to make note of this name, Abu Sager, all right? Abu Sager, a.k.a. Ali Saad Hassan, all right? And the reason why Abu Sager is important is he was Hussein's banker, all right? All banking issues concerning weapons of mass destruction. Okay, hopefully I'm ringing some bells out there for your listeners, Chuck. I really do hope so. Okay, because this will explain the behavior of the Republicans in party right now concerning the CIA report. Okay, it's very important that this all leads in together. All right, Abu Sager, and I want everybody that's listening to go to their computers and type in the name Abu, ABU, and then Sager, Seger. And what you'll find the banker of Saddam Hussein, who put together with the Bank of Iraq and the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, a.k.a. Bachi Bank, all right, and put in the financing arrangements for the purchase of weapons of mass destruction, VX/GF P400 bomb canisters that were purchased from the United States of America. They were reconfigured canisters in Fort Rucker, Alabama, stored in Pine Bluffs, Arkansas, shipped via railhead to the port of Houston, okay, on orders of the Carlyle Group. Okay, is everybody listening? The Carlyle Group. All right? So, in other words, weapons of mass destruction were purchased, okay, via, okay, the Abu Sager on orders of Saddam Hussein from the Carlyle Group, and here's something that we all need to remember, okay? Hopefully, most people have gone to their computers and found Abu Sager, because guess what? You're going to find my name also there as the agent who was running him, okay, and the agent who was renditioned over this issue. So, type in.
And just for the listeners' clarification here, you are the only U.S. intelligence asset to ever be renditioned out of a theater like that and survive, as far as I know.
And survive, right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm the only one that I know, and tortured en route. And as somebody from Germany said, Helmar Buchel, who was the senior editor of Der Spiegel, said, and he asked me, he said, "Do you know that you were tortured in German airspace?" That was an international incident with Germany, all right? The Germans suspected something, and they asked the plane, that was bringing me into Landstuhl, Germany, do you have somebody on board against his will? Okay, and they replied, oh, no, everything's wonderful with the world. And I was being tortured at that moment, all right?
I wonder if you could, and I hate to ask you to do this, but I mean, I wonder if you could explain what you mean by torture, because I have this feeling that you were not rectally rehydrated, but you were tortured nonetheless, and I wonder if you could just kind of bullet point those details for the listener.
It'd be my pleasure. All right. And fortunately, I was able to get. I had two psychiatrists accompanying me. Okay. I had been strapped to a stretcher, and I got their notes, their handwritten notes, stating that they had injected me. They had injected me with a interrogation CIA. Okay, and this is not the Culinary Institute of America. Okay, the CIA series of interrogation drugs called sodium amytal. All right, the sodium amytal series. And they were trying to find out who I had contacted about the torture. Because I'd filed charges, and I refused to back down on my charges about stopping the torture. And that's when I was grabbed, slammed on a stretcher, and carried onto a plane with these two wonderful humanitarian psychiatrists who are named in my lawsuit, by the way, named in my lawsuit specifically, and I was injected with mind-altering CIA interrogation drugs. Now, the problem is they have found that CIA interrogation drugs, like the sodium amytal line, okay, they cause brain damage. All right, that's why they were outlawed. Great. Okay, so I'm being tortured on U.S. soil, being flown through German airspace, and I'm being used, and I'm in this comatose state, semi-comatose state, being asked questions about who I had contacted, and they wanted to know who I told about the torture. Okay, and also it turns out they wanted to know who I told about the weapons of mass destruction that I had uncovered. All right? So, that's what I mean when I say torture. That is what it's called, is when you are injected with horrific drugs that you don't know whether it's night or day, and they mangle your brain, all right? They mangle your brain and destroy parts of your brain, okay? That's what I mean when I say torture. It's a torture according to the Nuremberg Accords. It's torture according to the Geneva Conventions, and it's torture according to the United States medical manuals and codes of ethics.
Now, this leads to a question, because I'm curious if you really know the extent. I mean, you obviously know that you were injected with this stuff. You know that you were interrogated. But, I mean, isn't it possible that you could have been subjected to other practices that you're unaware of as well, because you were so badly incapacitated and your brain was so terribly hindered?
I was comatose. There's no question about it. And now, I finally came to after about 4 hours, and nobody around. I was all by myself, and I'd realized what had happened, and so I literally cut myself out of the stretcher, and I walked over and looked out a window, and the European headlands were just coming off the Mediterranean. So I realized what had transpired. But the thing is, I don't know. If I had been rectally or anally rehydrated, I probably would have known that. Okay, somewhere in my comatose mind, I probably would have realized that.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't suggesting that you were. All I'm saying is that you don't necessarily know the full extent of what these people did.
No,
right?
These aren't exactly pen pal situations, okay? When somebody's torturing you, it doesn't endear any kind of fond memories or emotional sensibilities, with your torturers, Forget Stockholm Syndrome. It doesn't exist, okay, when somebody's torturing you. And so when Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, okay, was tortured in Camp Bucca, okay, he was basically rounded up. When I was renditioned, he was rounded up, and so was Abu Sager, okay. When I filed charges, okay, to stop the torture, they were rounded up, and Abu Sager was beaten to death, okay, by the CIA. He was beaten to death, all right? A 75-year-old man who could have given us a massive amount of intelligence, massive, unbelievable amount of intelligence, was beaten to death, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was sent to Camp Bucca, all right? I mean, this man had access to the most massive amounts of intelligence he could have given us, and we would not have had that 10-year debacle of destruction that we saw in Iraq, okay? There's no reason for that war to drag on and grind away like it did, for 10 years, okay? And the premise of why we were even there was beginning to come into doubt. But the thing is that if we had just done what we were supposed to have been doing, okay, instead of providing a diversion for bigger war profiteering schemes, okay, which is what it was all about, then we would not have lost the close to 12,000. 12,000. I didn't say 3,000 or 4,000. I said 12,000 people, that were connected with Iraq. All right. So that is the war crime in itself, and that is what the Republicans and the CIA do not want coming out. Is exactly the full extent of why we were torturing people, why we made a big deal out of it after Abu Ghraib came out and it hit the media, and we had a global conflagration. Okay, we had a global conflagration of anger over, especially in the Muslim world, over Abu Ghraib. And why we stayed there another 6-7 years. Well, we actually waited 8 years. We stayed after that. Okay, why did we? Okay, it's pretty simple now, and that is what I've been speaking to Senator Dianne Feinstein's office about the last 72 hours. That's what I've been talking to her office about, is what is going on now with this report, okay? Why is this report being released now? It's very simple, okay? There are bigger issues that were going on. And as I started to say, weapons of mass destruction, oh yes, they were not only sold, and you can get a picture of Dick Cheney shaking the hand of Saddam Hussein receiving VX P400 canisters, all right? Receiving those canisters, okay, to be dropped on the Kurds. 200,000 Kurds died, okay, in the Anfal campaign. And Donald Rumsfeld shaking the hand of Saddam Hussein and sealing the deal for more weapons of mass destruction to be dropped on the Iranian soldiers in the Shallow waterway. All right?
Well, and here's an interesting point, because you bring up Senator Feinstein, which I did at the top of the program also before you joined. But the thing is, this is not the first time you've had an interaction with her office. I find it extremely curious that at this point the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee is claiming that she was not aware of what was going on in country regarding the CIA's activities. And, of course, you're not somebody who claims to have been a CIA agent of any sort, but there is two things that people need to understand here. One, this is not the first time you've interacted with her office, as it were, and two, there is a bit of a difference regarding, because they keep bringing up this whole thing about the military manual regarding interrogation and all this stuff, the Army manual, and that this is what they were supposed to adhere to after we found out about this stuff, but they're feigning ignorance over it right now. I mean, regarding that, first, let's talk about where you were with Feinstein's office and about trying to inform them about what was going on. And then next, if we could explain exactly you not being part of the CIA, but being intimately involved with the same things they were, right?
Yes. In fact, they were in the same office as my command. Okay. I was a counterintelligence agent, all right, for DOD. Counterintelligence, all right. And our commands, the 205th, the infamous 205th was my command. 205th Military Intelligence, commanded by Colonel Tom Pappas, another name you can look up, all right, which will curl anybody's toes, all right? So we were all in the same office with the Central Intelligence Agency and military intelligence. And those young troops that went to prison for, quote, abusing the detainees or torturing the detainees, well, they were following our orders, all our orders, all right, both the agency and military intelligence. And they went to prison, okay, without ever being allowed to say one word in their defense, okay, and they were sent to prison. Now, yes, I did have interaction after I survived my rendition back to America, all right. Now, and the interesting thing was, of course, when I got to Germany, I was met by a colonel who first thing he said was, "Okay, what did you see?" And I told him, and he said, I'm not sending you back to that madhouse, okay. And then I went to a place called San Antonio, Texas, and there was another colonel who met me at the plane, and he said, "Look, what did you see? I need to know what you saw." And this was Colonel Robert Hardaway, and he is now retired from the military, but he was a psychiatrist, and he heard what I had to say, and he immediately filed those first charges of torture himself, based on what I told him. All right, that was the beginning of the sequence of all the charges that you're reading about today. That's how the first sequence started. Was Robert Hardaway actually took my testimony and went and filed himself. All right, and filed himself with the Inspector General. And then I was placed on a plane the next day, and I returned to California, where I immediately contacted. Within the same day after wheels touched down, I contacted Senator Feinstein's office, and in writing and a phone call and email, and I said there is industrial size torture going on in Iraq. It is out of control, and it needs to be dealt with now before we have the largest scandal, global scandal in American history, okay, on our hands. It has to be dealt with. And she was notified. I notified her office. And I know how bureaucracies work. You know, I might be dumb, but I'm not stupid, okay? You know, you always get some assistant or some secretary that, yeah, we've heard this before. Yeah, thanks, but, you know, don't call us, we'll call you kind of thing. So I contacted her office 3 separate times, gave statements to Senator Dianne Feinstein's office, all right, the San Francisco office, in the 9th district, her district, San Francisco, and then I contacted Senator Nancy Pelosi, and you can imagine the irony when Nancy Pelosi looks in the camera with her plastic surgery dies and says, you know, with this big, wide, innocent look of exclamation, states, "I didn't know anything about the torture." No, I'm afraid to differ. I beg to differ, Nancy. Yes, you did. I told you myself. Senator John McCain, all right, I contacted John McCain's office and informed him, and I've got the letter. You know, oh, yes, thank you. We will look into it immediately, right away. And, you know, it was, of course, you know, had the usual form letter, you know, thanks, but, you know, don't bother us quite yet, you know. Well, we don't have to do anything.
Well, generally speaking...
And then Barbara Boxer.
Okay.
Okay, Barbara Boxer was the 4th I notified. So they all knew, and this is 2003, the end of 2003, okay, 2003, early 2004. They knew exactly what was happening because I provided them with exact documentation and the type of brutality. Because remember, I was the medical officer trying to keep these detainees, as they like to call them, and prisoners, fix them up so they could be retortured again. All right, that was my job. Okay, and so there I am. Okay, I was able to give documented proof because I had all the forms, documented proof that yes, they were being abused and tortured in Iraq. And it was against all Geneva Convention accords that this was happening.
Well, right, and that's why I find it fascinating that at this point you have people like Jose Rodriguez, who was the former head of the CIA clandestine operations sector, as it were, stated that he'd never heard of any of this stuff, especially the rectal rehydration. I'm sorry to keep repeating that, but I think it punctuates exactly how disturbing this stuff is. Feinstein claims that she was kept in the dark the whole time. Former Attorney General Robert Gonzalez says he had no idea about any of this. And of course, the capper on all that are the recent statements by Brennan, who is the current CIA chief, who says that enhanced interrogation was garnered useful information, in the operations to get Bin Laden and all this other stuff. I mean, what do you think about the value of the intelligence that is gathered via what needs to just be described as torture to begin with? I mean, the concept of rectal rehydration, I mean, we've sort of made a little bit of light of it, but I mean, forced enemas, on prisoners, I think that they would just about tell you anything to get it to stop one way or another, because you're talking about a culture of people that insist that you wash your hands before you even touch the Quran. This is not exactly a day at the park for these guys. And the other thing about that is, of course, sentiment turning against us in the Middle East, and gee, they hate us for our freedoms. No, they might actually hate us for the stuff that was done to some of their people, especially once those stories get out. And I think it's got nothing to do with this, redacted mess of a summary. I think it's got more to do with the legend that's been created, the concept that's been created. And let's not forget that we don't really know the full extent of what went on. I think that they got you out of there before things really got kicked off. It might have been even worse. I mean, but you did see some horrible things. I know for one thing, you had talked to me especially about having to revive somebody whose heart stopped 4 times, right?
Well, actually, that was 4 separate people in one morning.
Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. You had to deal with 4.
I had to revive, right? Exactly. Cardiac arrest and 4 separate interrogation detainees, and not one of them was older than 15. Okay, so that's what I was dealing with. That's why I was having such a controversy, because I do have obligations of being, in medicine, do no harm, and there we are, clearly abusing these people. Now, one of the items that has, that I need to get out to your listeners, okay, is something, okay. Hopefully everybody's gone to Abu Sager and seen his site, okay, and seen my name in the documentation of his of his beating death by CIA and my rendition, okay, the documents of my rendition and the charges I filed. Hope you can see that, that's out there for the public, okay. How often do you get somebody calling in that has something like that, Chuck? Not too often, I would imagine. Mm. But so that substantiates everything I say. And here is one of the biggest issues that the public needs to get its mind around, wrap its mind around, is yes, the whole thing, okay, was winnowed down. Everything has a beginning, okay. And the beginning of this torture issue, okay, goes back to the King Khalid Air Base in 1989 and 1990. That's Saudi Arabia. And a study was done. Of course, who else? Who else would order such a gruesome study like this but Dick Cheney? He was Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, all right? He ordered this study to be done at Kinkley Air Base to study the psychological effects of torturing people, okay? And of course, they found out, well, yeah, anybody will say anything. Now, I mean, I'm a perfect example. Boy, if somebody was torturing me with rectal rehydration, you know, I would tell them anything they wanted to know, okay? And that is why you have something in the intelligence world that they never talk about in intelligence operations, especially now in the media. It's called compartmentalization, all right? That's why agents don't know who other agents are, because if they get captured, they can't give up the entire network. That's why this ridiculous bunch of nonsense about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, okay, giving up the entire network of people because he was waterboarded. Oh, cut it out. Please, stop. You know, when I hear this nonsense, I feel like I'm being anally rehydrated, okay? What a bunch of nonsense. That because all these organizations are compartmentalized. If one person falls, okay, that he won't give up. Okay, if he's taken prisoner, he will not give up. For under any torture, he won't give up the entire intelligence information to destroy the whole network. That's why they're set up that way. So that's why all of this is so ridiculous and ludicrous. But, of course, only Dick Cheney would order something like this to study the psychological effects of torture. And this was done on Kinkley Air Base. And what they found is that, yes, you know, people will say anything, of course. Everybody knows that now. I think my grandmother knows that, and she's in the kitchen baking Toll House cookies. She knows that. Okay, but the thing is that torture, okay, is purient. When somebody tortures another person, everybody wants to know, and it is a misdirective, okay? It is what's called a misdirective, all right? It draws everybody's attention to the fact and to the act, okay? Now, they have found that, okay, like in the Middle East, you can go through and shoot up a village, kill a bunch of people, and sure, everybody will be angry for a while, okay? They'll get over it. But if you go in and you grab somebody's child and you torture that child, the village won't get over it. The parents will never get over it, and they will seek to try to kill you and launch their own war, their own jihad, any way they can, okay, to get back at you for doing this, okay? So they realize that, and they also realize that if they introduce a sexual content to the torture, it will get everybody's attention globally, all right, globally. So what did you see? What did the whole world see on those photos of Abu Ghraib? Naked people being tortured, all right? Well, okay, all right. This is rather dramatic stuff, and I'm sure your listeners are saying, "Man, is this guy nuts?" Okay. If you don't think so, look at the 5 photos. There were several hundred photos of Abu Ghraib, by the way, and 5 hours of streaming gruesome video, but of rectal, not rectal rehydration, of phosphoric acid being poured onto rectums. Okay. Now, if that isn't gruesome, I don't know what is. But that's what was on those streaming videos that Dianne Feinstein saw and her House Committee on Intelligence and Collection. They saw that, okay? So the situation is like this, is that you have something that produces massive attention diversion. And during that period of time, as one of my sources told me, he said, the greatest war profiteering scheme perpetrated on the American people ever took place. All right? It had to do with oil shipments from Iraq, the wealthiest oil country in the world. Most people don't know that. Everybody thinks Saudi Arabia. It is Iraq, the wealthiest sweet oil reservoir in the world. And oil shipments were being shell games out of Iraq, and which would have stopped. I mean, every law enforcement agency in the world would have pounced on, okay, including the FBI, okay, in America. But there was one thing that was going on, and this was the attention diversion item of Abu Ghraib. Everybody was watching Abu Ghraib. Nobody was, everybody was looking south and west to Abu Ghraib when they should have been looking east to Kuwait City. Okay? And so you had the greatest war crimes profiteering scheme happening, and guess who headed it up? Dick Cheney. Okay? Am I the only one who thinks Dick Cheney's a bad guy out there? All right?
Well,
you haven't even scratched the surface.
I don't think you are. If you are, you got company, because there's I don't even know. I've made jokes that this guy's Darth Cheney and everything else. An odd question keeps coming to me via text, which I'm not sure what you have to say to. I've never asked you this question, or have no idea what you have to say about it. But do you know anything about Israeli involvement in this scheme, in this setup?
Okay, sure. I'd be more than glad to speak to that issue. Okay, I saw with my own eyes, in the Combat Information Center, CIC, okay, Israelis, all right, Israelis in uniform, nothing secret or covert or clandestine, and I was speaking to Brigadier General Janice Karpinski about a week ago, and she confirmed the same issue at Abu Ghraib, was that, yes, Israelis were at Abu Ghraib. And she said, and she asked them, what do you, I'm in command here. She told them, I'm in command. What are you doing? What are you, Israelis, doing in my command? And they said, General, mind your own business. And if you have a problem with that, contact Washington. Okay, do I need to say any more?
Well, you can say whatever you like about that, but that's pretty interesting that, if the Israelis are involved, then that means that there had to be some aspect of what we ostensibly call the Mossad also involved in this shell game, it appears. Mm-hmm.
This, I don't want to go there with the Israelis because, let's face it, they are, when it comes to enhanced interrogation on the Middle East mindset, all the anthroposophical stuff that goes on with the Islamic mindset, it would be the Israelis who we would consult with. Yes, there's no question about that. Okay, I mean, now as you said earlier, we threw the U.S. Army's handbook on interrogation, which had been venerable and time honored, for almost 40 years. Okay, we threw that right out the window. Okay. It is. I've read it. I had to use it. Okay. It is very, very lucid and applicable. And if we had applied the U.S. Army's handbook on interrogation, we would not be in the embarrassing position that we have been since Abu Ghraib. All right. We most of our allies don't trust us now. We have not received a single prisoner, an American soldier in Iraq. We have not, that fell into enemy hands or fell into Iraqi hands. We did not receive one single soldier alive, okay, that came back to us. No, they were all tortured, and most of them were decapitated, all right, as a direct result of Abu Ghraib.
Right, and not just journalists like we're being shown on the internet at this point, but I mean our other people that are there are also being captured for this reason, and it's kind of a legitimate sentiment if you think about it. If you're going to torture our people, we'll do the same to you. I mean that's how it comes down. The thing that strikes me as really bizarre about this Cheney being involved, with wanting that study ordered, and let's see what happens. All he had to do really was take a look back at the CIA's study on this already, because they'd already conducted that study at least 4 times in the past half century to determine exactly what the value of intelligence gathered in this way was, via the Church Committee, the Pike Committee, and even the Rockefeller Commission. In the 70s, we learned about some of this stuff. But, I mean, over time, a whole bunch of different things have leaked out regarding the agency's study on exactly what, enhanced interrogation, I hate that term, actually does. And what, and about that field manual, they're saying that, well, after 2006 we turned to that, and therefore, there was only this brief time where people sort of lost their heads. But nobody really lost their head. That's a bunch of bull. No. Because what happened is they were ordered to do stuff, and it trickled down to guys like you, because, okay, you're talking about meeting with these colonels and things at your different stops. At the time, you were a sergeant, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So,
actually, counterintelligence agent is my official title. But yes, in Army terms, yes, I was a sergeant, E5 sergeant.
Right. Okay. So, but the thing is, not to belittle you in any way, shape, or form, but the fact is, you were a man who had to take orders. There was a hierarchy regarding the counterintelligence chain of command, and there was also the military chain of command, both of which you had to adhere to depending on the circumstance. I mean, as I understand it, maybe I'm wrong. But this stuff didn't get dreamed up by the guys that you were standing next to. This was stuff handed down.
Right. Now, the way, like I said, I've had 10 years to live with this, and investigate. And investigate I have, all right? It's safe to say that they strapped the wrong person to that stretcher, okay, in June of 2003, okay? They strapped the worst person they could have found, to strap and torture, strapping a stretcher and torture was me, all right? And that was a big mistake that they made by letting me survive. That when that plane took off, they should have just opened that ramp and just thrown me out the back. Because I told them when I get back to America, all hell is going to break loose, and it has. And so here I am today with my court case that any one of your listeners can read. I'll give you the number even. But the thing is that I did some investigation. Okay, now I asked myself, why would the U.S. Attorney's Office be asked to produce a standard for some ridiculous bureaucratic bunch of semantical nonsense called an EIT, okay, an enhanced interrogation technique? Well, first of all, why would they go to somebody in the U.S. Attorney's Office who had no background in intelligence, no background in medicine, okay, had no idea, what an intelligence environment operates in, okay, especially in wartime? Why would they go to these jokers, as in John Yoo? John Yoo stated this publicly, that he was 5 days away from leaving. John Yoo was considered the architect of the enhanced interrogation, a.k.a. torture memo, or a.k.a., the organ failure memo, okay? Right. John Yoo, okay, publicly stated that he was going to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office because he was, quote, I think I can say this on the air, bored shitless, okay? He was bored shitless at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I thought, that's a reason why he introduced torture as a state tool of policy? Okay, in a country, in the United States has never used torture as a tool of state policy. And that's why he wrote that memo up, and that's why he brought the damage to America that has been done, because he was bored shitless and didn't have anything else to do. Okay, obviously we were in the hands of madmen. Okay, and, I don't think anybody would contest that. Being in the hands of somebody like Dick Cheney was a good thing. All right, gee, that was sound. Okay, he's made such sound decisions. Okay, yeah, I don't think anybody would contest that. Gee, Donald Rumsfeld, boy, now there is a Nobel laureate if I ever saw one. Okay, or George W. Bush. Okay, George W. Bush. Everybody thinks, well, he was just misled or misguided, misdirected, I think. Okay, no, as I said at the beginning of your show. No, we had a little issue, okay, called weapons of mass destruction that we supposedly invaded a country over on the orders of George W. Bush, Okay, it turns out those weapons of mass destruction were ordered, configured, and purchased by Iraq, purchased from the Carlisle group, okay, the Carlisle Weapons Sales Group, okay, and the irony of that is that the U.S. Senate has specifically prohibited the sale of those weapons to any country that would use them for offensive purposes, okay, like Iraq, who was in a war with Iran, okay. The U.S. Senate forbid the sale and transport of those weapons. They were so dangerous, so deadly, that they forbid. And surprise, not only were they sold, there's a picture of Dick Cheney shaking the hand of Saddam Hussein, and one of Rumsfeld too, shaking the hands of Saddam Hussein, securing those weapons, where they were dropped and killed hundreds of thousands of people. All right, is there anybody out there that sees that understands the irony that I've seen with all of this? You know, and so we have a country that we were supplying weapons of mass destruction to, that all of a sudden we need to invade because of the dubious issue of 9/11. All right, I mean, and all of a sudden we get this torture memo by a U.S. attorney who's bored shitless out of his mind, and of course he dressed it up in some nonsense, some patriotic nonsense about because he's Korean, see, and he didn't want to see anything happen to America like happened to South Korea from North Korea. He dressed it up in some pablum like that. But I'd love to hear somebody calling in on your show or texting in, Chuck, to say, look, I'm all wet with this stuff. Okay, I'm confused. All right, and then the best thing is George W. Bush takes us to war. Okay, and when I am in Iraq, we get these odd memos. Okay, locate any documentation and destroy it. Locate any documentation and destroy it. I'll say that. Okay, that would connect George H.W. Bush to the regime of Saddam Hussein.
That was in writing to you guys?
That was in writing to the intelligence services. All right? And it was called, we referred to it as the Great Bush Document Purge. All right? Now, and that did go on. An average of 60 to 70 documents a day were destroyed for approximately 9 months, 10 months. All right? So here's some documents that they missed, okay? And your listeners can hear about it, okay? They missed the bills of lading on the weapons of mass destruction that I and Agent Dave Dubato located in a bunker in Balad Air Base, all right? 29 warheads, all right, that were in a bunker that the Hans Blix inspection teams were looking for. They were looking to locate those weapons. They knew they were there, okay? Irony is the bills of shipment and lading were still attached to the packing cases of those weapons, and they were in a bunker, all right? And the great thing about it is they were in a bunker with 15 to 20 nuclear triggering devices, okay? They're also known as pits. Okay, when you detonate a nuclear fissile pile, like a bomb, okay, you have to use a nuclear pit to do that. All right, there were 15 to 20 nuclear pits in the same bunker. All right, that means that these weapons, okay, and the nuclear pits had been shipped there. Okay, and it turns out on the bills of lading, they were shipped there on the I.S.I.S. Wabash. Okay, a Navy ship was used to ship these weapons of mass destruction to Iraq, all right? And the nuclear pits were shipped, okay? They were designed on orders by George W. Bush. First order he made in office was design nuclear pits that detonate dirty fissile material, and they were reconfigured and designed in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and shipped via Halliburton Logistics. Oh, there's that Halliburton word again. Oh, there's that Cheney word. Okay. All right. They were shipped to Iraq. All right, they were shipped to Iraq. Now, what were nuclear pits being shipped to Iraq for? Okay, and why were weapons of mass destruction being shipped? The last one I could find on the list, on the 29 in the bunker, the 29 packing crates, the last date I could find, that it had recently arrived, was October. The October right before we got there, 2002. All right, these weapons were so dangerous, and they were on ground. Okay, they were on ground, and there were more weapons. There were several sets of weapons actually that had been shipped.
Well,
from what I could find.
You also mentioned the VX earlier, which a lot of people don't know what that is. You want to talk about that too, because that was another one of the.
Sure. Like I said, I was an intelligence agent with a medical background.
Right, so
Okay.
you had to be familiar with chemical agents and things like this, the things that you could possibly incur in theater. I mean, these are the deals that you have to know. You have to know how to deal with people that have been exposed to chemical weapons and things. I mean, this is chemical and biological, et cetera, right?
Okay. Now I was able to contact the commander of the fighter bomber wing, the Iraqi colonel, who dropped these weapons on the Kurds and dropped these weapons on the Iraqis. Okay? I found him, and I said, okay, tell me what you know about these weapons. And the irony is that Soviet intelligence had actually come in and studied these weapons. Okay? The Iraqis had invited Soviet intelligence to come in and do a technical intelligence workup on these weapons. All right? And the Soviets were giving the Iraqis intelligence updates on American forces and American Air Force capabilities virtually every week. All right? So I began to see a much larger picture, okay, involved in all this. And so VX, you asked about VX? Mm-hmm. I'm sure your listeners don't really know. Okay, VX, the irony is, it's an organophosphate with a platinum catalyzing chemical weapon. All right, it's called a city killer, and these were placed in 1,000-pound canisters, P400 canisters. Okay, because the Bush administration had tried to make something called the Big Eye weapon system work, and they couldn't. So they put these lethal chemicals. And these chemicals are from an old Bush family line of patents from Cyclone B. Okay, there should be some alarm bells going off out there. Cyclone B. Okay, just ask IG Farben Group of Germany about Cyclone B. All right,
right.
The organophosphates. Okay, that were used, and to show you the lethality. Okay, these things are what are called air deployable. All right, parachutes drop them from a fighter bomber, as the colonel said. Okay, and the spray, the aerosol spray comes out, and as the Kurds and the Iranians found out, it's beyond lethal. Okay, one microdroplet on your skin, a microdroplet is fog. Okay, microdroplet on your skin will kill you. Okay, that's how dangerous it is. And here's something that your listeners need to know, okay, because it should have its proper impact. These weren't just VX. Oh, these were the new improved VX/GF models. All right. The GF means is that there is no known antidote. Okay. With VX, your chances are probably 100% you're going to die from it anyway. But if you have the pyrostigmine, okay, injectors and so forth, the PAM injectors like most troops carry, you might, if down to a split second, you might survive if you can inject yourself. You might survive. GF, VX/GF goes right through a chemical soup. There is no survival. It is 100% effective. And these weapons were sitting on ground in bunkers, okay, like at Balad, okay, where I discovered the 29. These were in the first Gulf War, and nobody was notified. Okay, nobody on ground. The entire U.S. Armed Forces went into the Gulf, and nobody was informed. And the Bush family knew. George H.W. Bush knew that these weapons were on ground, okay, and if they had been detonated, bullets had been detonated, nobody within a radius would survive, all right? And there was only one person who knew, and that was General Norman Schwarzkopf. He was the only person who knew that those weapons were there and didn't tell anybody, all right? You can imagine the terror, of our troops facing something like this.
Well, right, because there would have been no sort of countermeasure for it available to your average troops on the ground. This is not something you can deal with easily. It's a high grade neurotoxin, which absolutely destroys all neural pathways when it's aerosolized. All you have to do is breathe. You're done. It's only a few seconds. I know that. And this is the point, is that when they talk about these weapons of mass destruction, and I'm telling you, it took me quite a long time to wrap my mind around this, because for the longest time I felt as though we were simply being deceived, regarding the fact that they weren't there and that this was just some sort of a grudge, which of course W had taken up for his father. But apparently it wasn't just that simple. He actually had to go and get rid of the evidence regarding what would have easily been, an international crime against humanity to even loose these weapons upon any civilization, any population. So this is really what the re-incursion into Iraq once again was about. And this kind of leads me to your court case a little bit, because we didn't really cover it too much last time you were on. We started to cover it a little bit, but I think, although I have an older version of it, because I know it's been redone a bit, your declaration pretty much says it all regarding this, regarding the not only the weapons of mass destruction, but your own personal situation. I wonder if you wouldn't mind if I read a bit of what you had put forth as a declaration. I have the. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no, I like I say, it's in the public domain, and and like I said, I find this absolutely ludicrous right now. All of a sudden, this fact that it's coming up that the CIA did torture and blah blah blah, and all the phony baloney pundits that are on TV, hand wringing and carrying on about all this stuff. How could this happen? And then watching the Republicans say, "Oh yeah, well we've been all over this all the time. Hey, we've got bigger projects to cover up. We've got bigger scandals to cover up. So let's just put this behind us." All right. So and that's a response to the Republicans. So by all means, and you have the case number, by the way, Chuck, on that. If I remember correctly, yeah, you should be able to get anybody that wants to look it up. Feel free to look it up. All right. Now, because I want your listeners to know exactly what has happened. Okay. And what has happened, in the longest ground war in American history, which was Iraq, and we're still not out of Afghanistan. We're still not out. All right. So, I want your listeners to know, exactly what's going on. So feel free to go ahead and read it on the air if you'd like.
Right. Of course, it begins like any other court document. You identify who you are, but let's begin. Where the story sort of picks up. I observed it says, and this is your declaration to the. Let's see which circuit it is. Just for a second here. Ninth
Circuit, San Francisco, Dianne Feinstein's district.
Right, for the Eastern District of California, and all of that. Let's see. I have served in the United States Coast Guard, the United States Navy, and the United States Army. In 2003, I was credentialed as a counterintelligence non-commissioned officer assigned to Detachment 1, Company A, 223 Military Intelligence Battalion of the California National Guard under the active duty command of the 205th Military. Intelligence Brigade, commanded by Colonel Thomas Pappas. I am also a qualified Navy corpsman and Army medic, In May of 2002, I was ordered to active duty, and in January of 2003, after training, I was ordered to Iraq as a counterintelligence agent. In April of 2003, while performing my duties, I personally observed weapons of mass destruction. To wit, and then there is a blank space, in an Iraqi underground storage bunker at Balad Air Force Base, with markings indicating that they were manufactured in the United States of America. I promptly notified my higher command of my findings. For reasons that I do not understand, members of the armed forces of the United Kingdom, not the United States, were ordered to remove and destroy the weapons. In May of 2003, while at Abu Ghraib prison, I was asked to care for prisoners, which I did. I personally witnessed and treated many Iraqi prisoners that had been abused and or tortured by United States personnel. On June 7, 2003, I reported to CPT Captain, Artiga and ITC Ryan of the 205th Military Brigade, headquartered in Building 1A of Abu Ghraib Prison, that the torture was wrong, counterproductive, and that my counterintelligence interrogation team should be replaced. On June 17, 2003, I filed formal charges for torture and abuse against my team. I demanded, quotes, whistleblower, end quote, protection. Shortly thereafter, while in combat zone, my M16 rifle was taken away from me. On June 21, 2003, I was flown out of Iraq against my will while strapped to a stretcher. When I arrived in Germany, it was discovered that I did not have orders to transport me and that I was not listed as a passenger. I was accompanied in the airplane by Captain Marie Madera to cover up my non-order status and to monitor my communications. She told me that, quote, you have been kidnapped to shut you up because LTC Ryan is terrified of what you have to say, end quote. From Germany, I was sent to Texas, where I was again evaluated, and then to Fort Lewis, Washington, where I was honorably separated from active duty. I strongly believe that I was relieved of my duties, kidnapped, and sent home because I disclosed to my chain of command information they did not want to know, and that they were afraid that I would report the information to persons outside the chain of command because they were not willing to act on the information I gave them in my typed and registered intelligence reports, which I'm going to ask you about. Looks like IR-CIIR and // WARNO using the CHIMS system. I declare under penalty of perjury under the laws of the state of California that the foregoing is true and correct. And then this particular statement was actually executed in February of 2012. Okay, and it's signed by you. And that's one of those documents that's in the public domain. Okay, there's a better updated one out there as well, but this basically says exactly what your complaint is here, what your situation was, and lays it out for the public to understand, right?
That's absolutely correct. And of course, the damage control has kicked in. The damage control systems, from the U.S. Attorney's Office on down, have kicked in. And of course, all of this has been proven true. And this was before the rise of I.S.I.S, which is causing a real panic everywhere in the Middle East and in the United States. And those weapons, and this is important, those weapons that I put out in my first declaration, those weapons, and I need to get this out. People need to understand what is at hand here. Okay, those weapons, the first several batches of weapons that were shipped over by Dick Cheney. Okay, Dick Cheney. Those, I only found 29 weapons. Okay, and those weapons, by the way, are registered on the Central Command, of the U.S. military, the Central Command's alpha weapons logs. They have those weapons registered. Those weren't just, this just didn't happen in a vacuum. And also, when I was in the bunker, to show you, the length and breadth of the cover up here, that I actually detached the dispersal door. There's a flap, when the bombs are, when these canisters are falling, onto a hapless population. And anybody can go look at the pictures of what happened to Lockjaw when these canisters fell. Thousands of people dead. They died mid-step. They were running, and mothers with their babies died in mid-step. Okay. Well, on each dispersal door flap, there is stamped the General Services Administration number, GSA, or we call it GSN, okay, number, where you can order these weapons of mass destruction. Gosh, I want to go bomb some country that I'm angry at. You can just contact the Carlisle Group and contact the American government, and they'll ship them to you via the U.S. Navy transport system, and they'll deliver them to you. All right, that's what that means. And so those weapons, when we invaded the Mukhabarat, there's that old group again, the Mukhabarat, okay, headed up by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, okay, ordered those weapons to be shipped on lowboy transports from Iraq into Syria, all right, into Syria. And virtually everything that you just read, okay, on declaration, the FBI has confirmed. The FBI office in Sacramento has confirmed on investigation that this is all correct and true, all right? And so those weapons of mass destruction were shipped, okay, the ones that except for the ones I found, the British intelligence destroyed those. The 29, the British intelligence destroyed those the next day. But the weapons that had been shipped before, those had been moved into Syria, and those weapons now, surprise, these people are dying in Syria because of chemical attack. Guess where those weapons went? All right, guess which weapons are being used? Okay, they said sarin. Oh yeah, you want to bet the farm on it? I don't think so. And so I identified the sites that I could find to the FBI where those weapons went. And a week ago, they just confirmed that they had found the underground depots of those weapons in Syria a week ago. All right, so that's what kind of issues we're dealing with. But what concerns me is even more is I said at the beginning of the show, 15 to 20 nuclear detonating pits, all right, that are loose. That these triggers are loose in Iraq, all right, and it's a good bet that they're loose in the hands of the fanatical army, ISIS, all right. And these people really are angry, especially about the anal rehydration issue. Okay, 5,000 fanatical hardcore troops. That's all it took to take up all of Iraq. Okay, when they got a hold of American equipment that was left, billions of dollars of American equipment. That's all it took, and they are now in control of Iraq, and they have these nuclear weapons. Okay, the average thermonuclear weapon requires, 5 kilograms of depleted uranium, or plutonium, all right? The nuclear pit, the detonator, takes up 2.5 kilograms of that weight, all right? So these things can be detonated, and we've got Americans in Iraq right now. They've got sent right back. Just about the time we thought we were out, we got pulled right back into it again because of all this chicanery that's been going on. I mean,
realistically, we haven't actually exited from the original, re-invasion, or as it were. Anyway, I mean, the rest of that is a shell game. In my estimation, again, perhaps I'm wrong. see, this is a strange question because it doesn't seem to fit right in, but I'll ask it anyway because it was text to me. Who, based on what you know, who do you actually believe was responsible for the September 11th attacks here?
I think on your last show, I think I gave a brief synopsis of what I was briefed on. Okay, and I don't mean to be long-winded, so I'll try to answer this as quickly as I can. Okay. In July of 2000, the year 2000, okay, I was at an intelligence training course in the U.S., and I had somebody named Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer. Anybody watch Fox News out there? That Anthony Schaefer, all right? Courageous, highly intelligent. I mean, above all, I mean, he was the guy who could have saved us, okay? And I saw what happened within 24 hours after 9/11 hit. Our Republican Congress and Senate attacked him, okay, in an Inspector General hearing. On an IG hearing, they attacked him. And I think I read, I do have several pages of transcript from that attack, okay, that they leveled against Anthony Schaefer because he gave intelligence agents the briefing, okay, in Arizona, the briefing, all right, and he said, look, he said, we have been tracking two groups, and the irony is here, there's large irony, two groups of covert terrorists, okay, covert terrorist groups, okay, and he said, we're having some problems because one of all the groups they had joined together, and they came into the United States. They came into the United States through Saudi Arabia. They received their visas at the CIA station. Get it? Is anybody out there listening? The CIA station in Jeddah. That's where the 19 terrorists, the 19 hijackers had their visas stamped. They didn't have them stamped in France or Germany or someplace like that. It was Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, all right? And he said, they are now in the United States. We are tracking them as best we can, but here's what we have. And he said, within the next 18 months, and this is July of 2000, within the next 18 months, there is going to be a massive attack on the United States. They are going to hijack planes. Okay. Now, Chuck, if I'm not speaking clearly, let me know. I want to make sure that this gets out there. Okay.
No, you're speaking 100% clearly, and I understand where you're going, and I want you to get to it. So go right ahead.
Good. Okay. Because, like I said, I'm not doing this to hear myself, talk about it anymore and speak. Okay. And so the hijackers are going to hijack. There's two groups. They're going to hijack airplanes and fly those airplanes into, first target is going to be the World Trade Center, New York City. The second target is and he used this exact verbiage, select targets around the Washington, D.C. area. Okay? And of course, our response was, whoa, wait, you said hijack? We haven't seen hijackers since, the 70s and 80s, early 80s. Some hijackers went to Cuba, other hijackers went to Libya, some went to, Entebbe, Africa, but we haven't seen hijackers hijack anything, okay? Why would they hijack planes? And the response is that the hijackers knew that, the passengers were conditioned to do nothing in the case of a hijacking attempt, all right? And also, okay, there were some important points to be made here, is that they were going to finish the job, okay, that they had started. The terrorists were going to finish the job on the World Trade Center. Remember, back in the 80s, the World Trade Center was bombed. Okay, they were going to finish that job. And that's exactly what they were. That's exactly what they did.
But we're talking
And
about
so,
the bombing in '93. Now, here's something that I do want to ask you, because
yeah, the underground subterranean bombing. Yes.
you got it with the Ryder truck and all that good stuff, and it turns out later that we understand that there was collusion once again with U.S. government assets there. Because the whole concept about the bomb builder that was involved there having been taken into custody actually was being handled by the FBI prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now to me, and I'm telling you that this might be where you and I diverge a bit, but I'm telling you that in my opinion, 9/11 was not a foreign operation; it was more of an inside-looking job, because these guys had all sorts of ties to intelligence agencies. They were well known. All of the the people that were ostensibly presented to us as hijackers had been allowed to enter the country, just like you said, via these interesting skates on their passports and everything else. Okay, there was some confusion as to whether these individuals were even on the manifests and everything. There was all kinds of chicanery going on regarding the official narrative, and I wonder if you have any kind of viewpoint on that, because it seems to me like either we lost control as some agents here. I mean, we as in the people that are supposedly working on yours and my behalf. Or if something got out of hand from them, I don't know precisely. But it does scream to me that it's kind of an inside job. Now, you might differ on your opinion there, but it is awfully fascinating that you're corroborating the whole thing about Tony Shaper's report regarding Able Danger. Right? Prior to, and this is something that definitely should have set off alarm bells if they were well aware of what was going on. And let's just assume for a moment, which I don't assume, by the way, that the narrative regarding the 19 hijackers is correct. I think it's a massive cover-up. But then again,
okay.
I wonder what you have to say to that.
Okay, Chuck. Like I said, I'm not diverging from what you're saying. At the time, when we were briefed, like I said, it was just a group of agents, intelligence agents, sitting, in a room, and we were briefed. Okay, and our response was, well, hey, if this is going to be domestic, the U.S. counterintelligence agents are not allowed to operate on U.S. soil, so we cannot, chase terrorists on our own soil. All right, we have to operate internationally. There's something. And I'm sure the Bush administration would contest this, but there's something called laws, okay, protecting the American people against certain intrusions, or there used to be until 9/11, intrusions of the intelligence agencies to be used, okay, against the American people. There's laws that protect against that, or used to be laws. Thanks to George Bush, there aren't anymore. But the issue was that at that time, this is what was known. Now, okay, things have changed dramatically, okay, about what we know. First of all, they thought they had the real identities of the hijackers. Well, no, they didn't. It turns out almost half the hijackers, they still don't know who they were. They still don't have true identities, because the week following, 7 of the hijackers, that were supposedly incinerated, in the World Trade Center, showed up saying, look, I didn't hijack anything. Here we are, okay? And by the way, everything I say, okay, to your listeners, I've already told the FBI, okay? And that was a big statement that the intelligence agents that I was with said, look, we can't operate. Only the FBI can operate, in this venue, in the domestic United States. Have they been informed? And we were informed, yes, both the Central Intelligence Agency and the FBI had been informed that Able Danger was keying in on these terrorists, and said, look, within 18 months the attack's going to happen. The attack happened 14 months almost to the day, okay? 14 months to the day that this attack came about. But we were told, okay, this attack is going to happen. There's no ambivalency about it whatsoever. Go home and get your lives in order. Get your wills in place. Go get your family affairs taken care of. you are going to be chasing terrorists, within 18 months, because this is going to be the biggest terrorist attack on U.S. soil ever to happen. Okay, and that's what we were briefed then. Okay, since that time, we have found out that Mohammed Atta, okay, we're still not sure if that was him or not, was actually trained at the very same place where I received that briefing. He had received more U.S. training courses, okay, U.S. training courses than I have received, and that's over 30 years, okay, that I've received courses.
Right, and that is one of the points I wanted to get to, is that we're looking at intelligence assets being trained by us, regardless of who they're identified as, being involved in one way or another, whether they were set up as part of the narrative or they were actually the people that pulled this off. The point here is that these were individuals that were trained by us, that were harbored by us, that were allowed to move internationally by us.
Right.
So this is why I don't think I'm so out of line when I think that it smacks of exactly what I say, which is an inside job. So, I know you might not want to go that far, but I'm just saying that's why I say what I say. Because
Right.
it's all over it. It's all over it. And you do make a good point. I mean, these guys are turning up. The identities have been fudged. Individuals' passports are stolen. Different guy. Oh, I'm actually an airline pilot over here in Saudi Arabia. This is the kind of thing that went on.
Now,
So
this time last year, okay, and I need to insert this. This time last year, I went to investigate, not too far from where I am. There was an airline pilot, former CIA pilot by the name of Phil Marshall. Okay, Phil Marshall, and I'd received a call saying, would I help on the investigation? He had apparently killed both of his children and put a gun to his head, supposedly, okay, because he was depressed ostensibly about his wife leaving him, okay? And so I went and actually stood in the house and looked at the blood on the floor, on the couch, all right? And that's where he supposedly killed his daughter, was on the couch, and his son, and the dog, okay? The family dog was killed too. All right. Now, you're probably saying, your listeners are saying, well, who's Phil Marshall? Well, Phil Marshall was a CIA pilot of many, many years. All right. And he has written several books. And the number 4 book, okay, the manuscript was there at the house, okay, was at the house, and it disappeared. The manuscript, okay, of the 4th book, okay, and the manuscript, basically, the way I understand it, okay, when we went up to do this investigation, and you can get the story, the Phil Marshall story, okay, and there was a movie made about it not too long ago, which immediately the government pulled off, for some reason, pulled off their advertisement for was YouTube. It's called Unthinkable. Okay, it's called Unthinkable. And it was about the Phil Marshall story. So, anyway, what he said was, it was the entire 9/11 episode, and he would know about flying planes, because he'd flown, and he had flown very interesting cases, including a case with Jeb Bush, okay, Jeb Bush, yes, that Jeb Bush, and Barry Seal, all right? And Barry Seal was killed, and of course Phil Marshall was killed, and the only other person left on this one dubious operation is now running for president, okay, for the Republican Party, Jeb Bush, okay? And so, yes, so that's why Phil Marshall felt obligated to write his stories, okay, and write these books. Phil Marshall. And so, obviously, if Phil Marshall felt that it was an inside job, entirely financed by the Saudis, okay, and And it was also, who else in America would be behind this, okay? Who would set it up and actually endanger lives, kill thousands of Americans on U.S. soil? Who else would be monstrous enough to think in these terms? Dick Cheney, all right? Dick Cheney.
Right,
Okay?
and precisely because what I would consider the Bush, again, I hope you don't take, strangeness with this statement, but I call it the Bush crime syndicate at this point, because
the Bush
that's
crime family. I've always called it that, the Bush crime family.
exactly what it is. Somebody said, in the chat room, well, why is it that, that the Bin Ladens were allowed to participate in the rebuilding of the Khobar Towers and all this kind of stuff? You know what? The bottom line is that the Bushes and the Bin Ladens were absolutely in bed together. This is public knowledge at this point. This is not even remotely hidden from the public. I mean, I don't even know why that question is part of it. This is the reality that we're dealing with here. And of course, we're still going to deal with it some more because President Jeb, and yes, I hold my head low when I say that, President Jeb is a possibility. So keep in mind that your next puppet in chief may very well be, one of the ancestral members of this clan of criminals that we call Bush in this country. So,
by the way, there was a photo missing from the home, and it showed all three, Phil Marshall, Jeb Bush, and Barry Seal in a plane together. All smiling and all, hail good fellow. Okay, it had something to do with the photo had something to do with something called the Central Intelligence Agency running cocaine up from South America into the United States. Has anybody ever, everybody thinks that the CIA actually stands for the Central Intelligence Agency. Well, the way I understand it, okay, it stands for the Cocaine Importation Agency. All right, gee, imagine that. Okay, and so there's Jeb Bush. Okay, and that photo disappeared. Okay, from the house. That's one thing everybody was looking for, was that photo, and it was supposed to be in a manuscript about 9/11. Okay, now like I said, Barry Seal was killed about the day before he was supposed to testify against George H.W. Bush. Okay, George H.W. Bush in the Senate. In the Senate, he was killed, in New Orleans, and he was machine gunned with Uzis, in the back of a building, all right? And, of course, Phil Marshall was killed, and like I said, I went and saw the blood, he saw the trashed home, Phil Marshall, it's in the gold country of California here. And I saw the blood on the couch from where his daughter and son had been killed. They were both sleeping and they'd been shot in the head. Okay, and Phil Marshall put a gun to his head supposedly. Not after he killed the family dog, by the way. So so obviously there's a lot to all of this. And if you ask about 9/11, hey, what was it? 10 days ago, they found somebody that was suspected of being the what's called the master blaster, the demolitions expert, on 9/11, a former Navy demolitions expert was found floating behind his boat, in the river where it was at, found floating behind his boat with his head sticking out of the water, He was the demolitions expert that introduced the thermite and sulfonated thermite to the girders that were cut to bring down those towers. Okay, those towers, the World Trade Center towers, were designed to withstand a 747 strike. All right, and I have never seen, I've never heard of a building before or after falling because of airplane striking them. Especially those buildings, because they were designed by United Laboratories. The girders were designed by Underwriter Laboratories to withstand exactly that strike. Okay, so sorry, that's my take on 9/11. And like I said, I was sitting in a classroom when Anthony Schaefer said, "Please prepare America. We're going to have this strike." and then I watched the Republican-controlled Senate try to tear Anthony Schaefer to pieces. Okay, they destroyed within 24 hours. All the intelligence that he gathered on through Able Danger on these two terrorist teams was gone. It was shredded. It was destroyed within 24 hours. Okay, so what does that tell you? Okay, what does that tell your listeners? All right, so.
Well, exactly, and look, it's not hard to follow. Central Intelligence Agency, cocaine, importation agency. Well, that would work, except for the fact that they've also been participating in the importation and distribution of heroin as well, via the poppies, which we found out about, in Afghanistan. Of course, the residual effects of what went on in Vietnam. Previous to that, we of course had another illicit drug scourge on the streets of America. Via the heroin epidemic in the 70s, right? Just so happens that our military and intelligence people were quite occupied right near something called the Golden Triangle. Okay? This has been a continuing thing that has happened. And of course, when did heroin reemerge on the world stage as a massive drug all around the world? When we went back into Afghanistan. Coincidentally, a good place to grow the poppy plant. This to me is no big mystery. Of course, you're exactly correct, though, that Barry Seal was definitely silenced so that he could not reveal some of the inner workings that went on regarding the South American cartels and the cocaine that was being introduced into the streets of America at a rapid pace. I mean, you look up a guy named Ricky Ross, and you'll find all about how he couldn't sell it fast enough. It was coming in too hot and heavy for him to even distribute it nationwide. Okay, this is stuff that has come out to some degree, but of course the official proclamations from on high have refuted all this stuff as we go, and it does feed right into the phony drug war. Again, these are my opinions. But go ahead.
One of the issues I'd like to get out before we run out of time here is when I was in Iraq, okay, and we were informed, okay, in the circles, something called copper green, okay. Has anybody out there, and I want everybody to report in if they've heard of copper green. Very few people have, okay, especially out of the intelligence services. Okay, but at the beginning of your show, you remember I said diversion, misdirection. That's what this investigation was all about. Okay, all these phony balonies on these talk shows, all hand wringing like a bunch of weak sisters. Oh, this is all terrible, or we've been all over this before. Let's put it behind us and let's get on. Okay, as I said, one of the greatest red herrings, okay, that the government has ever pulled on the American people, okay, is Iraq, and they used the torture issue to do exactly that, all right? And I said sale of weapons of mass destruction by Republicans, all right, by Republicans, okay? Look at the Senate records. The Senate records will say those weapons were never to be sent to Saddam Hussein. Yes, they did. Yes, they were. I found them in a bunker. Okay, there they were. But the issue of copper green, okay, here, as I said, a great diversion for the American public, okay, is this investigation. As I told Senator Feinstein not more than 48 hours ago, I told her office, actually, I said, Department of Defense, copper green, okay, it is a program of rendition, torture, and assassination that is for a fee, okay? That's the American way, let's face it, okay? I mean, you've got sitting presidents busy shipping weapons of mass destruction that will be used, quite possibly, on the very same troops that are sent to find those weapons of mass destruction, okay? Gosh, that's the American way, okay? And in this case, something called copper green, all right, has 68 countries, okay, that are signed up with copper green, with the United States of America, to send their political dissidents and troublemakers, okay, to what are called black operations sites. Black ops sites. Everybody's kind of heard about those, but it's always an hushed, whispered reverence, okay, black ops sites like Poland, like Hungary, okay, like the former country of Syria, okay, like Iraq, places like these had black ops sites. You know, because we poo-poo the idea of torture, or we don't like it in America, okay, and we try to apply American laws on American soil, okay. And I'll tell you what remind me to tell your listeners what the U.S. Attorney's Office told me when I was tortured, and what they said about that, okay. The U.S. Attorney's Office, all right. So you have copper green out there generating millions and millions and millions of dollars every year now, okay. Guess where that money's going, all right? Because we are busy still torturing, renditioning, and murdering and assassinating for a fee, okay? And then, as a result, we're allowed to control those countries, control their politicians, and give them access to their natural resources for whatever capitalist, exploitation projects that come along, okay? Copper green. That's what I told the Senator Feinstein. That's why a DOD investigation has to happen to find out, okay, forget CIA and their bumbling and fumbling about torture. They had MK Ultra. They knew exactly what mind distortion drugs would do. MK Ultra, all right? And they knew exactly what was going on. They didn't have to go to a bunch of quote bored shitless U.S. attorneys to ask them to go ahead and plagiarize and which they did the Spanish Inquisitional archives of the auto de fe. That's where they got their definition of waterboarding. Nobody had ever heard of waterboarding before until the U.S. attorneys went into the archives of the Torquemada himself and pulled out the definition of waterboarding as a torture and trapage and the rack, the recoiling rack. Okay, and I bring that up because guess what? Okay, copper green and all this stuff. That's what they're hiding. That's what the agency and that's what the DOD is hiding right now is copper green.
Well, that's why it's a bunch of bull, really, that they brought out this other piece of the narrative where they say these two psychiatrists they hired turned and reverse engineered what they were doing based on what they taught for evasion and escape techniques, to troops, right?
Sear stuff, right? Sear school. Oh, please cut it out. I know what goes on in Sear school. Believe me, for more than one reason, I know what happens there. What a bunch of CYA, that's what that is all called. They just, and like I said, hey, I was raped, and most people don't know this, but I had my cousin was in the command, who is an interrogator, warrant officer, who went to Iraq with me, okay? And he told me, he said, Greg, he said, look, he said, yes, everything you said was absolutely correct. Torture was not supposed to be authorized. They weren't supposed to be doing this. And he's a commissioned officer, and he's a warrant officer who is a specialist in interrogation. My cousin, okay? And he said, here's why they renditioned you. Here's why they tortured you, okay? It's because they were basically furious that a simple enlisted like I was, okay, albeit with 30 years of experience and 12 years of postgraduate studies, okay, was enlisted, okay, was telling them that they were breaking laws, humanitarian laws, Geneva Convention laws, Nuremberg laws. That's why I was renditioned. That's why I was strapped to a stretcher, okay. They wanted to find out, first of all, about the weapons of mass destruction, okay. Now, for your listeners, the weapons of mass destruction were produced on order by the Carlyle Group. Guess where the defendants are working now? Okay? Guess where the defendants of my case are working? They're working for the very same group that they hid the weapons of mass destruction for. The Carlyle Group, and they work for a subsidiary called Booz Allen. Okay? Hamilton. It used to be Booz Allen Hamilton. Okay, they work for them right now. As I'm saying this, they work for them right now. Okay, everybody's heard of Booz Allen as in Ed Snowden. Okay, obviously Booz Allen Hamilton doesn't really quite adhere to the veracity and of our laws. That I do, or a lot of other people do. Okay, but that is a situation that came up when I was in Iraq, and my cousin told me. I didn't understand exactly what had happened, but he told me. Okay, now the U.S. Attorney's Office, they stood in court. Okay, to show you just the integrity of the U.S. Attorney's Office, after they had introduced torture as a state policy of America. We never used torture ever. It's not even on our lexicon. Okay, torture. All right, they stood in court and said, and they told a federal judge, Kimberly Mueller, this. Okay, that it was okay that they drugged me and they tortured me. Okay, to show you the mindset here, that they tortured me because, quote, it wasn't on U.S. soil. All right, it wasn't on U.S. But yes, they used illegal CIA drugs that destroy a central nervous system. Yes, they tortured me. There's no question about it. They renditioned me without orders. I didn't exist. Like I said, they could have thrown me on the back of the plane, put the ramp down. Nobody would have known because I had no orders. Brigadier General Karpinski, okay, who I speak to on a regular basis, 2 or 3 times a week, okay, said, she was stunned when she found out that I'd left a war zone, a U.S. war zone, okay, and been renditioned without orders. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Okay?
Right.
But there's the U.S. Attorney's Office who said, oh, yeah, it's okay to torture people, because we have what's called organ failure standards, okay? You can torture somebody, give them indescribable pain up until the point of organ failure, okay? Mm. Only a lawyer would think of some nonsense like that.
Well, exactly.
Only a lawyer.
Exactly, and completely ignoring the fact that you're not allowed to be a U.S. citizen who departs from U.S. soil in order to commit a crime, all of that kind of stuff. You're still responsible when you return here to answer for it. And you know what? We're just about out of time. Mr. Ford, you are more than welcome if you want to hang on, for the next show, which my wife does, called Jaded. Which is an open forum show where we take calls, and of course everybody is more than welcome to try and call in. If you want to stick around, you can continue discussing this, but it is amazing every single time that I have you on, these 2 times only so far, but I am just absolutely amazed at your wealth of knowledge regarding these things that we are hearing about, and I think it was absolutely appropriate to have you on tonight, and I can't thank you enough.
How much time do I have, Chuck? Do I have time to get rectally rehydrated?
Well, since I don't exactly know how long that process takes, I'm not sure, but
I don't either.
I can imagine that it would take longer than like the couple seconds we have before my obnoxious bumper kicks in. I want to thank everybody for listening, the people for chatting, and I didn't ask for phone calls this time because we were just, once again, really caught up in the conversation. But like I said, if you want to, you can stick around, Mr. Ford. I would be really happy if you did, and I'll stick around for that show as well. You would just have to put up with my obnoxious bumper, Kim's music, and then her introduction, and then we could continue the conversation, and I'm sure we'd get people to join in the discussion. So
that would be great.
And anybody that wants to, absolutely. Anybody that wants to, it's 718-717-8296. If you're on my Skype list, I will add you in because Kim will use my Skype list to continue this on. Thank you for listening to the Ochelli Effect. Everybody have a good night, and stay tuned for Jaded.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files.
you know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they